Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday interview sessions. I am your host, Ryan Hartley. This channel exists to inspire and encourage your heart-centered leadership. Each week, I share interviews with some of the greatest heart-centered leaders in the world. I hope our time spent together helps you leave a heartprint where those around you are left better than yesterday. Please visit abty.co.uk if you would like us in your corner. These interview sessions are brought to you by Matt Media Online Marketing, an independent agency who specialise in content marketing, helping business owners get their message seen by the right audience. If you want to get your business seen through the power of social media, head to mattmedia.online. On episode 217, I am joined by Luke Iorio. Luke is a transformation coach, guide, advisor, and host of the much talked about podcast On This Walk. Luke has walked alongside tens of thousands of clients and listeners as they search for meaning, purpose, and alignment. Luke's passion for helping others stems from his own spiritual path as he journeys with the beauty and joy of reconnecting with one's true nature, finding real balance, and feeling connected, healed, and whole. As the previous president and CEO for the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, Luke had the unique and fortunate opportunity to work with influential people and organizations who were not satisfied with life and business as usual, granting him access to a laboratory of transformation that few people have had. Luke continues to serve as partner and board member for iPEC, and the insights and experiences he gleaned to inform his coaching, retreats, and podcast. We have an incredible conversation around what it means to be a heart-centered leader, a heart-centered man, and you'll have to forgive the audio quality from my end. I didn't turn on my proper microphone, a proper schoolboy error, but you will hear Luke loud and clear. And here we go, episode 217 with Luke Iorio. Luke, welcome to Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you, brother?
I'm great, Ryan. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, man. Just a shout out to our great friend David Bryan for connecting to heart-centered human beings. Like he's a good connector. I've really valued having David as a friend because he seems to be opening the doors to just connecting great, like-hearted human beings. So we probably wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for him.
Most definitely.
The funny thing is about like men of heart and like people of heart, like. I think you and I have both read the work of David Hawkins, and I think in one of his books, I'm pretty sure I heard the word that light cannot enter a closed box. It either gets open willfully, or the universe kind of cracks it open. And I just wonder which one of those two paths kind of resonate with you. Is it an open willfully into the world of heart, or is it like cracked open?
It's one of those things I would love to say that it was willingly opened up, but come on, let's be real, right? Cracked open again and again and again and again. It's part of actually what has led me into the work that I've done for the last 20 years, where the process is still continued, is the hope that through things like the podcast work that we both do, that we do through coaching and training and things like that, that it gives the opportunity for someone to more willfully open up that box and not have to wait for the universe to say, I'm coming in. And I know that's, it's been a part of a driver is to expose people to that, to give them that chance, that invitation to open up. But in reality, the reason why I've gotten there is through, numerous experiences, time and again, some small, some huge, that brought the light back in.
Well, I look forward to touching on some of those things. And I understand that you just used the word coaching, and I understand coaching's been a big part of your life. What brought you into the world of coaching?
The universe. There's that universe yet again. I was actually operating as a small business consultant, working mostly in the entrepreneurial fields, companies that were under about 35 million in revenue. And a part of my background of how I got into consulting was that I had done small market, same marketplace, mergers and acquisitions, and a little bit of capital raising as well. and a group that happened to be in the coaching industry happened to reach out to me one day looking for a ton of free consulting advice, like 20 type questions, looking for a ton of insight. And to be honest, it was one of those days that I read it. I'm like, I've seen this email repeatedly. People are just looking for free stuff. And I usually hit delete on that email over, like, time and time again. I've deleted those emails, and I caught coaching at the end of the URL. Now, I grew up playing sports. I didn't have the slightest idea what, like, life coaching exactly. I had no clue what I was getting myself into. And so I went to their website, really intrigued by what it was I was reading. And I took the time to go through the whole process. It took like 45 minutes for me to write through like all the questions that they had asked. I click send, and I don't think it was 7 minutes later, my phone rang. We'd like to sit down with you for an appointment. We'd like to talk to you. And I began engaging them and working with iPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, as a consultant now. Well, let's see, it was almost 20 years ago, because I think I met the founder who became my business partner. I think I met him like a few months after I got married. And so I literally got pulled into the field of coaching because it spoke to something I was beginning to see in the market with the entrepreneurs that I was working with, where I could watch two entrepreneurs, similar resources, similar backgrounds, similar execution strategies of what they needed to get done to build their business, grow it, or make it more efficient, whatever we happen to be doing. And one company would just thrive. They would take off. They do amazing. The other company would completely flounder, and they do nothing but chase their own tail over and over again. And I ultimately came to realize, before I found coaching, that it was all based off of the kind of the awareness, the energy, the leadership of the entrepreneur themselves. And so it had to do with like these linchpin people inside of these organizations. But other than what I was doing as a consultant, I really didn't know what to do with them. But I was becoming fascinated in personal development and professional development. And then coaching came along, and it spoke to, I could actually see the level of awareness, the level of empowerment and ownership that those individuals that learned how to thrive, they just approach things from a very, very different perspective. And I recognized the awareness, the consciousness that was behind what they were doing. And I found a way of working with that through the field of coaching.
Hey, my friends, thank you for being with us so far. I hope you're enjoying the interview. I just wanted to take a quick moment to let you know about our signature Heartprint coaching. Our Heartprint coaching is for you if you're ready to go all in on becoming a heart-centered leader, ready to go all in on doing more of what you love, ready to see what you are capable of with support, guidance, and accountability. You're ready to go on a rapid, transformational journey that will change your life and others in as little as 3 months. Are you ready to show up with courage and share your gift with the world? Ready to start making an income and more impact by doing what you love? Ready to start leaving your legacy where those around you are left better than yesterday? In our Heartprint signature coaching, in our time together, I'll help you lead from your heart set. I'll help you develop other people and your team. I'll help you bring your heart work to the world. I'll help you start leaving a legacy and capturing examples of your impact. I will help you be someone you love, to do more of what you love, and to serve people that you love. It's an amazing opportunity for someone who's ready to go all in and be a heart-centered leader. I'll throw in loads of other bonuses, including your life languages profile, access to our Master Heart and Mind membership, and even some Always Better Than Yesterday merchandise. Head to abty.co.uk/coaching to find out more, and I look forward to connecting with you very soon. That's abty.co.uk/coaching. Here we go. Back to the interview.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the things that happens, I think you talk quite a lot about this word alignment. Yeah. And I think the irony, the paradox is that when you gain that awareness, the first thing you notice that where the misalignments are.
Absolutely.
Like, I think you talk about it on your podcast. You talk about how, the early phase of your life was building the good life.
Right.
It's building this successful business and everything's great and the money's coming in and it's flowing. But what did, as you deepened through being a coach, reveal? It's like a two-way thing, isn't it? We put out this coaching stuff, but we can't not be impacted by the thoughts and the questions that we're asking other people and ourselves. And
absolutely,
What did that start to kind of reveal to you about what was important to you over those decades?
Yeah, I think, it was that something shifted. And so you described it, exactly right, that it was about building the good life as I had understood it at that time.
Right.
Checking the boxes, right? A happy marriage, two beautiful kids, the fenced in yard, the couple of rescue mutts. I mean, the whole thing, right? The package was there, making good money, doing work that was very meaningful.
You
All of
should be
that.
happy.
You should
You
be. Well,
should be
that's
happy.
it. And
Yeah.
that's I should like what's going on here? I should be happy. I should be beyond grateful. I
Yeah.
should be completely like just enthralled with my life. And I'm not saying that there weren't aspects of that were very true for me. I did feel those things. And there was just this deeper nagging that just wouldn't go away that said there's something more. And what I had to realize, and this was probably the, part of the challenge of some of the changes that came about, was that I was in fact changing. So there was nothing wrong with what I had pursued. Some of it maybe was not completely conscious. Maybe, certainly some of it was conditioning from family and culture and society, but there's nothing wrong with it. It was a happy life. It was a good life. And as I began to check those boxes and realize that accomplishment, that achievements, that status, that material wealth, that et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they were never going to actually fill this space that was within me that was looking to connect to the world in a very different place. And so over time, the more that I achieved, the more that I checked off to become, I was the CEO of this extraordinary institute with this worldwide reputation. I became the CEO at 32. Like wildest dreams, I never imagined I would be in the positions that I was in. And I kept checking these boxes off, and the happiness and the fulfillment it was never coming. It was, looking around and saying, wait a minute, I thought I achieved everything that was not only for happiness, but also for purpose. So now it wasn't even about happiness. It was about purpose and meaning. And now that didn't line up. And that's when I finally got to this point of, holy crap, what do I do now? And the big existential questions and crisis, enter stage left at that point in my life.
Yeah. There's a heavy weight to those questions, because when you're brave enough to ask those questions, you have then the responsibility to do something about them.
Yes.
But I
have to.
I pick up on the words that you're saying, and it's like, I want to be really crystal clear for the heart-centered listeners. Please. Is that you said there's something more, and I find the thing that makes me smile is I know that you're not on about materialistic more. It's not about having more. It's not about the riches, the more money, the more fame. It was about the immaterial. It was more the spirit, the soul, and I guess I understand that, and I really want people to really hear that if there is that feeling of something more, it's the inner voice, it's the inner guidance, which I know that you're passionate about talking about.
I'm so glad that you're extrapolating on this and picking it up in this manner, because that more, there's such this irony to it, is that, right, is that part of the more is more emptiness.
Less,
meaning,
yes.
Right, it's that releasing of all the crap that we've picked up and carried with us, that are the attachments and the entanglements, the ways in which we've tried to make our identity more solid because we think it'll give us some sense of certainty in this world. And the more that I could empty that out, the real more that I was seeking, and I can only articulate this in very, very recent understanding. I wanted more of my spirit to come through. That in whatever whether it's spirit, soul, essence, intuition, true name, I don't care what your word, whatever it is for you, right? Consciousness, whatever it is for you, there is this essential part of who it is that we are, that we're born with, that's innate to us. And that was, we can go into it if we need to, but that was part of what was a turning point for me, was an experience where I came face to face with recognizing that I had left that part of me. And so for me, it was getting back to that. It was this journey home. And that's the more, it was the more spirit that I wanted to have in my life, because I knew that would bring more aliveness. It would bring more connection with life and with people in such a way is there was nothing between us. Like I didn't want to experience life through some type of lens or filter. I literally wanted to touch life and to touch connection in that manner. And the only way you can do that is by bringing more and more of the spirit of who it is that you are through.
Are you familiar with the hero's journey?
Yes. Yeah.
What was your dragon?
Dragons.
Right.
My biggest dragon, if I look at it from this perspective, was my very own identity.
Sure.
And in that identity, from just the really quick backstory, right, of where the journey began, was that when I was 5.5 years old, childhood home burned to the ground. And my parents describe overnight, my mom particularly said, she like, your personality just immediately, you went from this, creative, kind of in your own world, storytelling, weird little kid, right? Very playful, to being serious, being fiercely independent, self-reliant. And that persona took over because that was my way of being safe. It was my way of saying, I'm going to control this, since not even my own parents could keep this from happening. And, these are the things that we think as a child, right? 5 years old. These are the way that our belief systems are formed.
Yeah.
Because we don't have that level of consciousness to be able to filter that yet. And so I built this identity that had that independence. It had that self-reliance. It made me a really incredible in terms of being able to focus and achieve like all the things that were then rewarded by the world. Like the world's like, oh, you got it. Yeah, let's keep going. Let's feed that. Right. And so I was feeding that wolf, and that's what was coming out. And then to realize that your very own identity is an illusion. Yeah. And it holds on to you fiercely, because you literally, like, if you break that part of you, if you shatter that illusion, the map of how you navigate the world, the belief systems, the relationships, like, you now believe in that moment that you risk everything. And there was still something that, I mean, I had no choice. Like I said, I had a moment that I came face to face with it, and it shattered the illusion, where it was like, okay, well, I guess there's no going back. Here I am.
What forced you to come face to face?
It was had a rough year. I went to 4 funerals in the same year. Of the last two were expected, 2 were not. Of the last 2, one was a father who was just a couple years older than I am, who had girls just barely older than my own kids. And it was one of the most devastating funerals I've ever been to. So it just, it like stuck in me. Like this is really close to home now.
Yeah.
The next funeral, which was only like 6-8 weeks later, was sort of a role model to me, who'd been a family friend. And this beautiful eulogy gets delivered, and people really knew him. Like, when you heard the eulogy, like, you knew, wow, that's exactly who he was. And his family knew it. They got it. Like, they could see it. It's so cool. And so I come home from that funeral, pretty kind of emotional, a little bit raw. My wife drops me off. She's going to run some errands before the kids come home from school. And I make it about 10, 12 steps into my door, and I collapse on the ground. Just everything just starts pouring out of me. It's like the weight of the world, it was gone. Like it crushed me. And after, I don't know how long, a complete sobbing mess on the floor, I do the very typical man thing. Oh, I gotta clean up. I can't let my kids see me this way. Right. Very, very beautifully stereotypical role right now. Right. And so I go upstairs to change and clean up. And before I'm heading back downstairs, I decide to throw some water on my face, wash my face. And as I do, I look up in the mirror, and I guess for some reason, I felt like I had not looked myself in the eyes in 35 years. And all of a sudden I make contact with what I felt was that 5-year-old self in me. But I'm looking at the consciousness, and I recognize the consciousness in me has not changed. The face has, the hair has maybe grayed, all those things, right? But the consciousness is exactly the same. It's always been there. And as I make contact with that, I can feel just these overwhelming emotions and energies starting to rise in me. And it's like coming up right from my root through my gut. And as it passes through my heart and it's getting to my throat, I recognized that the feeling that I was having was rage. And I raged at the mirror. I shouted because it's just all that could come through me at that moment. And I shouted into the mirror, "Where did you go? How could you leave me?" And it just ripped through me when that energy came out. And even, there's another humor to this, right? Is you yell into a mirror, right? So what's coming back at you? But to this day, I don't hear the words yelled at me. I hear them in this really soft, nurturing voice that comes back at me and says, "Hold on, where did you go? How did you leave me?" And it just hits me. Now I'm a sobbing mess again, right? And it just hits me like a ton of bricks that the essence of who we are has never, ever, ever left us. It's just part and parcel. It's baked into the fabric and the energy of who we are. And it's us. It's us in our pursuit of what we think this life is that leads us away. And it leads us on this journey where we think we're chasing things. We think we're creating things. And really what we're doing is we're walking away from the truth, the essence of who it is that we are. And so in that moment, it was one of those of, okay, life can't go back to being the same. And my journey since, it's been whatever, 8-9 years, I think, since that experience. And my journey has been just all about, how do I come back home? How do I get back to that place where that spirit, that essence can just flow through in everything that I do? And so that's my journey. That's my work. It's my podcast. I mean, that's what we're doing. Frankly, I think it's a big part of what you're doing.
Hey friends, I just wanted to take a quick moment to introduce the new official sponsor of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast, Matt Media Online Marketing. Matt Media have been involved in the production of over 100 interview sessions. I highly recommend their services. Matt Media Online Marketing are an independent agency who specialize in content marketing, helping business owners get their message seen by the right audience. If you want your business seen through the power of social media, head to mattmedia.online. You can find the link in the show notes. And here we go. Back to the interview.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And, one of the goals I set out with this podcast, all those years ago when I started it, was for it to be very practical, for some way to take a tip. And I don't even know how to boil what you've just down to say, hey, there's a top tip to take away. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it is just leaving space for the possibility that can happen.
Yeah.
I wonder whether, at that time, you've obviously got the language for it now because you've reflected on it. Was consciousness part of is it your awareness at the time? Was that an awakening, or was it because many people put a lot of burden on their spiritual encounters with source, spirit, God, and I haven't heard from him, I'm not hearing from that, and sometimes that can cloud the even hearing, this
Absolutely.
expectation of why am I or why am I not, versus, I guess, where were you in that point? Was it something that came out of nowhere, or was it progressively dipping into this awareness and spiritual side?
Yeah, there was some progression that was there, but I think that even the approach that I had to understanding consciousness, working with consciousness, because it was kind of baked into some of the models that we used inside of the school that I was at, I was still approaching it from the identity that was very cognitive, right? Because my identity was still very much intellectual, and it was very mind-based, because that's how I created my world. That's how I created my safety. I created my identity. All of it was based on that.
Sure.
So even though I was talking about and researching and understanding and even reading the books, right? I had read Eckhart Tolle by then, and it was still being perceived through that mental lens, right? Of, this is how we
therefore I am.
Think, therefore I am. And therefore, if I raise my awareness, meaning if I know more things, then I can think even more clearly. And yes, there's some truth to that, but you're always going to hit a ceiling with that process. And this was a moment that just absolutely broke through that ceiling. And I went in, which you and I have talked about offline. We talked about on my podcast and on this walk. that I went on this, journey of, I went into mindfulness and I wanted it to not be secular. So I took it from a Buddhist philosophy. I worked with a teacher for a couple of years. That took me into other Eastern philosophies. That led me to Gnosticism. It led me to Christ consciousness. It led me a little bit to Sufism. It led me to Native American studies and other indigenous studies. So, I mean, it's just this wild journey. But what ultimately I had to kind of break through, and not even break through, I had to surrender a lot of the mental constructs. And the challenge that I recognized that I had, and this was probably the awareness that gave me something to keep coming back to, was that I knew that I couldn't think my way into this new way of being. I knew it was not going to be achieved by my mind. So I knew that it had to be another part of me, which ultimately got me connected to my body, to my heart, to my emotions. And when I did that, that's when spirit, soul, divine, whatever, started speaking more clearly through my own inner guidance. To your point, it was there. That inner subtle voice of the inner teacher is always there. Couldn't hear it. My mind was in the way. My mind was too loud.
Well, do you think that's a byproduct of Western culture? Because I think, if we look at the Eastern philosophies, that's the very starting place, isn't it?
Yes, completely.
You talked about Gnosticism and, Buddhism, and, even in the Gospel of Mary, which I guess is considered a Gnostic text, is that she says that Jesus said that attachment is a passion against nature. Which my interpretation of that is that, attachment is not the way of the world, because, nature is temporary. Nature, you can't take it with us. It rises and falls with the seasons. So to be attached to anything is a passion, which is a suffering. We're going to suffer our attachments.
Whether you want to follow it from a Buddhist philosophy or a Gnostic or Christ consciousness philosophy, they're all pointing to exactly what you just brought up, which is that our attachment is ultimately at the root of our suffering, because we are consistently trying to attach identity, belief systems, etc., to whatever it is that we see, experience in this world, because we believe that that's going to give us a level of certainty, meaning that, if I can just label that thing or label that part of me, that gives me some level of permanence, that's not going to change. It's an illusion. Of course it's going to change. This next moment going to change.
Yeah. I was listening to Karma by Sadhguru last year or the year before, and in it, just sometimes like the universe just slaps you with a quote, doesn't it? And it was like, Sadhguru says there is no suffering without our permission. It's just when you address the irony of that, you think, oh man, like, wow, there is no suffering without our permission.
It brings us back to what is a very, very difficult thing for us to take ownership of as human beings. We are creators. And so nothing can be created, including the suffering that we end up feeling in life, without our permission, without our active participation. We don't realize that by even believing a story, by making certain choices, or feeling like we don't have choices, that our choices are dictated to us, we don't realize that we're buying into the very, very fabric of the illusion that's actually creating the suffering. And so we have to be, it's not obviously an easy overnight type process, but the more that we begin to understand, wait a minute, I have a role as a creator in my life. Yes, there are 7 billion other people on this planet. I get that. But I have a role of how I create my life from moment to moment to moment. And the more that we can keep coming back to that, so that we can look at, okay, if I take this next step in creation, am I reinforcing what has been? Or am I moving at least 1% closer to what it is that I want to create my life around?
Yeah.
If we keep coming back to those little type of sparks, we're just shocked at what can be created and what can be changed in what is relatively a short period of time, given the decades that we have been building towards our own suffering.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the individualistic cultures make an enemy of ourselves, because we think, if I haven't, why haven't I? And then it factors in a little bit of comparison and entitlement.
Yep.
Versus there's a compassion to be had because the system doesn't want you to break free of that. Without
Right.
being too political,
Right.
The way of the Western world doesn't want you to have those inner experiences and guidance because you don't become a customer and a consumer when you become a creator.
I'll take it even further in just the sense that we don't have to do this simply from a political or consumerism standpoint. This is true even in our own family dynamics and family fabric, right? Because if we all of a sudden take responsibility at this level and we say that I am responsible for what happens next in my life, I'm going to play a role in the creation of that. And we start taking action that noticeably changes our lives. Several things now happen. Number one is the way that people used to relate to us and the way that we related to them is fundamentally going to change. As that begins to fundamentally change, there's a gravity that we start to feel because people want to kind of pull us back to wait, don't fully go there because I don't know you that way. I want you to stay close enough within what I know is who you are or within what I thought would be you. I want you to stay there because if you change, my fabric of reality starts to change. And now I question what's possible. If I question what's possible, I may realize that I don't have an excuse anymore to change. I now need to actually take responsibility for myself. We, as a society, from family up to consumerism and politics, change is threatening.
Yes.
Change is really threatening.
And that cognitive dissonance that people feel, that mental discomfort that people feel when they see somebody else changing and they are faced with that reality of I could be on that journey too. The easiest way to get rid of that cognitive dissonance is not to do the difficult thing, is to make an enemy of, is to ridicule, it's to laugh, it's to say, oh, that's easy for you to make excuses. And I think that's really important for people to hear is if you are in the heart-centered creation business of bringing your heart to the world, and they'll sometimes bizarrely, some of those people closest to us can end up not being that supportive of the venture. And I think it's because of that cognitive dissonance. And it's easier to either ridicule or justify or any of those reasons than it is to be brave enough to be on the same journey with you.
So this is practical, although it may not seem as kind of like simple as everyday kind of thing, but just to bring that point home, the more that you can do to get comfortable with your own discomfort, the more your life will change, right? Because when the cognitive dissonance comes up, people feel the discomfort of that and how many things, whether they consciously know it or not, they feel discomfort because of the things that can fall apart. And so they seek comfort as fast as they can. And comfort can come from distraction, TV, social media, political fighting, whatever you want to do, right? That's distractionary type stuff. It can also come from making the person other than you. Judgment, blame, shame, pushing them away because that's a form of control. That we feel like I feel I'm better now. I'm in control. I feel more comfortable. My world is safe again. The more that we change that within ourselves, meaning that other people, we can't control other people's journey. We don't know where they are in life and we don't know what their path happens to be. But the more that we can take responsibility for, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to try to control. I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to blame. I'm not going to distract. I'm actually going to be with my discomfort. I'm going to be with the cognitive dissonance of this. I'm going to be with the fact that there is huge uncertainty that I have to confront if I start to make these changes or even believe that those changes are possible. When you start to become more comfortable with that discomfort, that's when you can begin to face the things that are actually holding you back from change, that are holding the illusion in place.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is an illusion. And I think, once you put these you take the glasses off, you start to see things for how they are, not how we wish they were or wish they were different. There's another one-liner is that a man that thinks he is all that has a fear that he is not.
Yeah.
And, and that's, or something to that effect. A man that thinks he's all that underneath is a fear that he is not. And I guess that comes from what you've just said is about this desire to make things right or wrong or to make me better or, and in doing that, there's a fear that maybe I'm not that person. Maybe I'm not going to be seen by the world. And I guess.
Well, and there's just to add context, uh, which we don't get into very often. Part of those patterns of wanting to appear more than, appear bigger, appear like we have it all together, as just examples, right?
Mm.
That's part of an evolutionary trait that developed, right?
Mm-hmm.
We needed the brightest, the fittest, the strongest to mate, and we
Mm.
wanted to have mates, right? So we needed to have that part of who we were really kind of stand up as the alpha, because that's the way that we attracted mates. And then you combine that with the social aspect of, if you got kicked out of the tribe, you were dead,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
you've got all these other factors that kind of feed into where some of these traits developed. Well, we moved into a different civilization. We're not in
Mm.
that time 10,000 years ago. We've moved on beyond that. And so those are outdated programs that are still running inside of the psychology of who we are. But we also have to remember that we were in the kind of the tribal areas, so to speak, of who we are as the evolution of a species for tens of thousands of years. We've only been dealing with this level of advancement and consciousness and everything else that we're achieving right now in maybe what, the last couple hundred at most. So
Yeah.
we've just got to remember there's a lot of rewiring that's also
Mm.
needed in this process. And
Mm.
again, I share that to give context so that we don't want to use anything that we say is another way of people using that to create judgment, or, oh, look at
Yeah.
where they are, their journey, whatever. It's no, put it all in context.
Mm.
There is a reason why all of these programs are still in our society. And the more we know about it, the more responsibility we have to make sure the programs, at least within us, start to change.
Mm. At the start of your podcast on this walk, you say this one line, I really enjoy it. It's about having a connection with self, soul, and something bigger than ourselves. And take us back to that, the moment with the mirror. There's a wonderful poem on your blog that talks about falling into wholeness. And it's this idea that sometimes as we're falling into the void, that actually we find our whole selves. I'd love to kind of pick up from that mirror moment and just
Sure.
hear a little bit about the journey as you kind of fell into wholeness beyond that point.
Thank you for connecting that. I think what I realized was that in that mirror moment, I had picked up so many different pieces of identity, which were really pieces of armor to
Mm.
keep me protected through the years. And it was just, as I were talking about a moment, it was my way of controlling. It was my way of creating safety and
Mm.
protecting, and keep adding in all the all the descriptors there. Um,
Yeah.
and when you start peeling those away
Mm-hmm.
and realizing that the reason why I don't have the level of connection with life that I wish to have is because of all of these layers and these protections that I've put in the way, right? So I've created my own walls. So I'm going to start to allow those walls to fall away, right? So that the light can get in. And I'm going to start to let that fall away. It feels like you're falling into a void because it feels like death.
Mm.
And in many ways it is, because your identity, or at least major portions of your identity, or some significant portion of your identity, is dying. The
Right.
way that you've known yourself in that capacity is falling away.
Mm.
And then you fall into what feels like this void, because for a while, I had trouble even thinking about how I wanted to relate to life and relate to friends that I'd had for 20 years.
Yep.
And because I literally didn't know who I was. I didn't want to, I knew I didn't want to tell the old stories. I didn't want to puff up the old identity anymore. I didn't want to pretend like, no, I'm fine, I got it all together. I did that for too long. And so, but I also didn't have the words yet to talk about what I was going through. I sure as hell
Mm.
didn't know where I was going.
Mm.
I didn't even want to answer the question of where I was going, because I just wanted to be where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you fall into that void, what you also, and again, this is through people that I have worked with and beautiful teachers who I've just had great fortune to be with over the last many years now, helped me begin to recognize that the void that I had fallen into is like falling back into the womb,
Mm.
and that you're actually being nurtured and held for a period of time so that what needs to regestate can. And the more that we allow to fall away, what that also means is the more possibility that now re-enters. And that possibility can find you so that you can feel it and you can go, yeah, you know what? Something about that one. I can like feel it. Like even right now, even talking about this, I can feel it in my body because it just connects in a different way. And I think that was, it's one of the concepts in Buddhism that I had such trouble with, was this idea of emptiness.
Right. Yeah.
But when we're actually in emptiness, what that also means is that all things are now possible again, because there's no attachment. There's no form. So if it's formless, literally anything can be put into form now. So that falling away, that falling back into wholeness, falling into wholeness and falling into emptiness are basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. And you fall into this space where all of a sudden everything becomes possible again. And if you can be patient and have courage and be present, the things that begin to re-enter, you start to have this conversation with, to say and to feel, is this in alignment with the deepest part of who I am? When I was born into this world, was this actually meant to be part of that path, to be part of what I gave to this world? And the only way you truly hear it is if all of those other stories and narratives and identities have really started to fall away.
I love that. So what we're basically saying is, don't make an enemy, don't be anxious of the void, but instead embrace its possibilities and the gift that it is. Because, many people will go to that discomfort and the disorientation that it might provide and go, get me out of here. And, whether
Completely.
that be seeking things of this world or repeating old programs and patterns of the past. And and this is an invitation. If I know a couple of people in my circle that are going through similar voids, and every time I have a conversation with them, it's like, absolutely lean in. And you can see it in one of two ways. You can be anxious about, oh no, like, what's the gap? Or you can be, curious and energized and have like the approach you said, where you can turn up and just see what is possible if we just look at it, face it, embrace it. And I interviewed a lady called Maureen Murdoch, who wrote the book The Heroine's Journey. So she wasn't fully satisfied with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So she wanted
beautiful work.
It is, and she wanted to make sure the feminine was absolutely represented. And one of the things that she said is that it's not until we go into the abyss and come face to face. I can't remember the description of the word that she used about who you face in the abyss. But it's not until we come face to face that we can then ascend.
Yes.
And the final phase of any cycle is integration. Yes. So for as long as we delay and for as long as we avoid coming face to face with that which is discomfort, we delay the inevitable, which is our ascension.
Absolutely. And it's, to speak to that, right? To be clear for everybody listening, right? When I was falling into the void, I was grabbing at stuff left and right. Like, come on, let's be real here, right? I was grabbing on
surrender.
I'm like, exactly. It's like, I don't want to surrender, right? I'm holding on to the bank of the river because it's about to take me, right?
Right.
And I did go through that, and I went through phases where I'm in the void and I'm just kind of taking a peek, like, it'll be a lot safer and more fun if I just kind of reached up for this other thing.
Yeah.
And that's where, not just the knowledge or the guidance I was receiving of what I was going through.
Yeah.
But it was also, because you mentioned the one of the circles, for instance, that you run, having a support system like that, right? To go through a void, but to do that inside of a community, that can actually hold that space for you and to remind you of what you have said, what you have shared, what they've seen in you, the deep yearning and longing that you have expressed, that they can hold that space so that you've got a community to come back to that says, listen, we know the world out there might be crazy. The world may want you to just choose this or choose that and get on with your life. We're here to still hold space for you, because if you want to still be here, we're going to support you through the whole thing. We got you.
Yeah, one of the hardest concepts, I think, for the Western world to embrace is this concept of wu wei, the art of doing nothing. And I think we're so used to being able to force it, our will be done. I don't think anyone that I've come across coaching-wise is afraid of hard work and doing what's difficult. But what they do struggle with, and what I used to struggle with, and you just said the word river, is this idea that you can't push a river.
Yes.
This idea that we can't force it, we can't push it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and coming to that acceptance, not realization, it's truly accepting that.
Yes.
Because in a Western world, it feels very passive. It's like, wait, what, me do nothing? What, am I going to be a victim to my circumstance? Versus, how can I be at one and allow a greater will than I be done?
Absolutely. It's funny. I've used that phrase so many times for myself as well as with clients of, do me a favor, walk out into the woods, find that beautiful river that you love. I'd like you to go up to that river and push it. What do you mean push it? Right. Like, no, go ahead, push it, move it out of the way, move the flow of life wherever you wish it to go. And they're like, oh, okay, I got you. And it's where, it's such this beautiful surrender, though, when we come to that acceptance, and then we recognize just how much there's this beautiful energy that we're connected to that is trying to help consistently lead us back to wholeness. And I go through that. Still go through this. I go through it right now, of looking at the different things that I'm engaged in right now and recognizing there's parts of these opportunities, these engagements, everything else that deeply align with who I am. And I also don't know where it's leading, because I know this isn't the thing. I'm done with believing like this is the thing. This is the stage that I am in. And I've got to be here fully and be with what's right in front of me and give myself to that. And by doing it, the flow will continue to move me to what's next. And it's just funny. I'm honestly having kind of this dual moment right now where I'm almost laughing at some of the stuff I'm saying, because if you knew my younger self,
right,
I would be so upset with myself right now.
100%. Mate, right? I've said exactly the same thing on podcasts. I'm like, the irony is not lost on me.
Absolutely. The people. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say the people that have known me for 20, 30 years, we have some really good laughs, right? They're like,
who's this guy?
Who is this guy? You used to have everything planned. You were the guy that knew what was going to happen 3 steps ahead, and you did this, and that's how you made your career. And I'm like, I know, and I burnt out really badly.
Yeah. And I've got long hair now. We have very similar stories, but it's so funny. It's so funny. But I interviewed a guy who's got a very popular Instagram page called Words Are Vibrations. His name's James McRae. He's based in Austin, Texas, and he does loads of memes and really cool stuff. And he wrote a book of a collection of all his memes, and it was titled "How to Laugh at Yourself in Ironic Amusement During Your Existential Crisis."
I love it.
and I think that's when you know that you're coming through this vortex of growth and expansion, because you can learn to look at yourself with a degree of compassion, with a degree of ironic amusement. And I think, I think Russell Brand does this incredibly well, which is uses humor as a way of expanding our kind of consciousness.
Yeah.
Almost like a Trojan horse.
It is. And again, I don't want it to sound trite, but we do take things way too seriously. And that's actually part of the illusion as well, right? Is that if we take it really serious, then it allows something to be more solid than it actually is, right? It's part of the way that we solidify things. And, when we can have, for years, I talked about this is, every single one of us, we live in our own weird little world. Nobody will ever know the weird little world that exists in me, because it's mine, just like yours is yours and somebody else's is theirs. And we do some really, really funny and goofy things. Only we know how weird we really truly are, right?
Yeah.
celebrate it. It's funny. We do things that we look at ourselves like, did I really just do that? Have fun with it. It's part of the way that we grow and live and enjoy this life a whole lot more.
It's freedom to
It
that.
is. It is. It's, again, if we can't laugh at ourselves, if you have trouble doing that, there's an attachment to your identity to look at.
Right. Yeah. Or a fear of something, fear of rejection, fear of, something externally that we might be seeking.
Yep.
And I guess that comes back to the identity that maybe I am not that, I do not have that. And again, one of the things as I continue to journey through, I love like words. And this idea that desire, so much of the manifestation world is about, hey, what do you desire? And actually the word desire means I do not have, which is the very blockage to having the very thing anyway, is believing that it is not yet
separate
present.
from you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely, completely. It's interesting because I just did it's part of a group that I'm running right now as well, and really helping people begin to separate that idea of needs and wants, because much of to where you're going with desire, there's this constant of, well, what do you want? What do you want to create in your life? What's this? What's that? And we forget that so many of our wants, so many of our desires are actually just our strategies to fulfill an underlying need. Ooh. And if we would get so much clearer about what our real needs are, that need of love, that need of connection, that need of peace, that need of balance, etc. Now we can get very clear about, well, the strategies, the wants and desires I'm using, really not doing that. They're not helping, or they're a whole lot more complicated strategies than they need to be. And so when we get to that, there's so much that can fall away, and we can begin there's
many ways that I can take this conversation, and I want to kind of bring it home with a conversation about masculinity, and I'll use one of my own examples here with that kind of whole desire thing, because Ryan Hartley, when he's feeling sorry for himself, he can become quite a needy guy. Like my wife's like, oh, it's so needy. Like, I just want you to tell me, fulfill my words of affirmation. Tell me how amazing I am. Tell me you love me. Tell me 3 reasons why you love me. And it's funny because in the Letting Go book, it talks about how when you need something from someone else, that desire to have something met from someone else is felt like internal pressure. Yes. And actually the irony and the paradox is that it then becomes resisted. So the very fact that we become needy from other people creates a blockage and a barrier to getting what you very much want and need. So I have to spend a lot of time in myself, leading myself to needing nothing, leading myself to having all that I need, which is where my spiritual time comes in, and leading to that. But I guess for you, like, how do you reflect on what I've just said?
So absolutely correct, and in alignment with the way that you described being needy. And to me, when we begin to recognize that whatever it is that we need is actually something that comes from us.
Right.
If we need love, we've got to be able to find that and give that from ourselves to actually create it inside of our lives. If we need acceptance from someone, it's because we need acceptance from ourselves. And that's really kind of that recognition of being a creator that is true for us, is that what we need is something that already sits actually within us, but we've been trained and conditioned for all sorts of reasons, which we don't need to go into, to look outside of ourselves to fulfill that need. Because if we can create the outer environment, then, I got to that need. Like, that need feels good now, right? As opposed to saying, well, how can I actually connect to and fulfill that need here and bring that into my environment?
Yeah.
And now my environment and what I feel internal are working in this beautiful, virtuous cycle, as opposed to one that is being approached from a point of lack. And so it comes back to from within ourselves.
Yeah. And JC once said that the kingdom is within.
Absolutely.
And you talked about Christ consciousness. What does that give you as a human being? What does that enable and equip you with?
My connection with Christ consciousness.
Yeah.
It is, to me, it is from a personal standpoint, having grown up in traditional religion, I recognize a lot of external forces and external influence that was saying through us, that's how you get to him. If I use the storyline, right? Christ consciousness is that recognition that that consciousness is something that already exists completely and inherently within us. And when we begin to view the words of all of the masters, Christ, Buddha, etc., and we begin to view their words as consciousness that was trying to be bestowed and help us remember that consciousness within ourselves, it takes on a whole new understanding. It takes on a whole new meaning, and it's a felt meaning. It's a felt experience when I connect in that way. And so for me, it's really been, you can say, there's even been books with the title, right, of Awaken the Buddha Within, Awaken the Christ Within. It's coming at things from that recognition that that energy, that consciousness exists innately in all life, including us.
You got a top book you'd recommend? I'd love to read more about it.
Book from one of my teachers is The Freedom Transmissions by Carissa Schumacher. And it's a beautiful set of transmissions that she does from Christ consciousness. That certainly is one that is core to me. Another, which I think you're already familiar with, is I just adore the writing of Richard Rohr, Father Richard Rohr, and The Universal Christ is another great, a great book that talks, actually, that's very interesting, especially because of some of the history he shares of looking at what Christianity in connection to Eastern roots actually has. And so that brings up a whole different perspective of what I would say is slightly more connected to Christ consciousness.
Yeah, I think the world of Christianity or organized religion, I think what it does a disservice to itself is it gets moralistic and doesn't leave room for questions. And I think a curious spirit has to make space for curious questions, and a fearful religion that says don't look elsewhere for answers almost does exactly what we've just said, is it creates an opposite spirit, or it creates fear and control to comply. Whereas for me, I find such freedom in learning from things like Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton. And when Joe Dispenza says that the production of oxytocin inhibits the production of cortisol, and I read the Bible and it says perfect love casts out fear, I'm like, I get deeper connection to God, to spirit, to Jesus, whatever that might be. So it's like, have no fear, like, have no fear, because we're all in the pursuit of the truth, right? And the more we can ask questions, the more we lead ourselves closer to those heartfelt experiences, right?
Absolutely. There's this, I had the honor of studying with the Four Winds Society, which is Dr. Alberto Violdo's work. And he tells this beautiful story of, or this fun story, I guess you could say, of when the conquistadors had started to take over South America. And the head of the conquistadors is now challenging one of the head of the tribes, the Karoo in the high Andes. And he's there and he's waving the Bible in front of him. And he says, this is God. This is God spoke to us, whatever it was, 12, 1400 years ago. And this is the word of God. And this is what we need to follow. This is what you need to follow. And he turns to the chief and he says, and when was the last time that God spoke to you? And the chief looks back and he goes, at breakfast. We had lunch together. We had breakfast together, right? Because it was just this idea that it's a personal relationship with the spirit that's in all things. It's always here. It's always here for us. And that's, to where you're going with curious questions and that ability to interact and engage with this beautiful life force that's inherent in everything that's around us. The more we connect to that, that's part of our personal relationship with whatever this mystery is.
I think when we all look at all living things as fractal expressions of God, then we're all that little bit closer.
Absolutely.
I'd love to have a conversation about, masculinity, because you are a heart-centered man. It's a bit of a journey, isn't it, for most people to get to the heart center, but particularly in a world where most men have been conditioned out of theirs. And I guess, what are some of the challenges you think modern men are facing, and how might we encourage them to tiptoe down this journey?
Well, I think thankfully it's something that's beginning to awaken. Although I see the pendulum kind of going back and forth, which is that the image of masculinity that had been reinforced through modern society of the last many decades now was pretty broken, because it reinforced. And I'll use the very stereotypical here, and from an American viewpoint, the image of the Marlboro Man was, one of the most painful in terms of furthering that idea, that stereotype of what a man should be. He should be a loner. He should be completely tough and independent on his own. He shouldn't be weak in any manner, which means he cannot show any form of vulnerability. He's got to honor his independence, his strength, and his intellect over his emotions. And it just reinforces this broken and not broken, an imbalanced, better way of saying it, an imbalanced energy of what masculine is meant to be.
Right.
All those things are still true. We should still embrace the strength of who we are, the intellect of who we are, the ability to be a protector and provider and have presence within our lives. But to have that presence, to have that true full masculine presence, there are other attributes of who we are that we need to be able to bring into the fold. That's how we can hold space for others. That's why people can feel safe in our presence, is not because we're so fiercely independent and we can show how armored we are, but because we can still have that strength with our arms wide open too. And so I think we're being asked to rebalance what is the image of masculine and the energy of masculine inside of each of us. To me, one of the ways that needs to occur is through a path of vulnerability and being willing to enter into spaces, into whether it's working with a coach, whether it's being in a men's circle, whether men's work of some kind, that allows us to start to speak to the things that we have kept locked away within us, believing that we could never admit, share, talk about, or expose ourselves in these types of ways. We need to be able to face those energies, because that's where shame lives in darkness, self-blame, all these types of things. That's what leads to aggression and violence and things like that are the result of imbalanced masculine. We can break that shell through vulnerability and through men actually learning how to hold space for each other, the way that, frankly, women have done for each other in various ways with varying degrees of success. But they've had that communal aspect, that way of relating and socializing that has supported them in different ways, whereas men were supposed to be fiercely independent on their own. And so if we can enter into those spaces to let down our guard, we can work through a lot of the things that have remained imbalanced within us. But to me, vulnerability and putting yourself into a space where you can be that open is really the beginning of that path for most men.
Yeah, the word that keeps coming up over and over again in this conversation is identity. And I think a man brave enough to explore his identity is one where he will realize all the good, the bad, the indifferent is all one to be valued and accepted. Yes. First by self, and I think the most powerful thing a man can possibly do is go down that journey, find out what he truly cares about, find out what he truly loves, that truly cares about, because something wonderful happens when a man connects with his heart, which is he becomes honorable, he becomes noble, he becomes willing to serve others rather than be served. And I think so many men are using business as an extension of the receiving of love with which they did not get. Yes. That naturally there's a conversation around toxic masculinity, using that power over rather than that power within. Of course, that's a byproduct of that conversation. Yes. That's not masculinity, in my opinion. True masculinity is it looks and feels like love, but in a way that is safe, yes. Not nurturing, safe and protective and providing. And I think one of the biggest barriers that men face is that they're not able to provide that heart-to-heart connection, maybe that the female in the relationship will desire, because he can't meet her any deeper than he's met himself.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely. It is there is that facing of our own identities, as we've been talking about for most of our time here, that allows us to be able to peel away. But to that last point, we have been taught to fear what we feel.
Right.
because what we feel makes us vulnerable. And we've associated vulnerability with weakness.
Yeah.
And there's a long history. I mean, you can long history on why that is. And
Yeah.
the more that we can actually learn how to turn towards what we feel and learn how to face it with courage and with strength, not with falling apart, not with laying down, that turning towards your feelings requires extraordinary strength and courage to be able to do that. For me, I just another piece of this, which I also think is critical to men's work, was there needs to be a somatic piece, meaning that of the body experience, because so much of what we've been taught as men is we retreat into our minds, we retreat into more of an intellectual type of space that creates distance from what it is that we're feeling. And when we can be more in touch, more sensitive to the things that are actually unfolding inside of our body, to feel that tension, to feel that anxiety, to feel the pains, the aches that are there, that are not because we worked out, but because there's something going on. When we get present to that and we get present to those sensations, we get present to the emotions. Now, all of a sudden, we can work with that energy in a manner that is not simply of the mind. It's more holistic in the way that we can work with it. And that's another very important part of how we are able to open our hearts, because then with our partners, with the feminine, we have then that ability to actually literally feel and be in connection with them. And it's both a physical felt experience, but it's also an emotional one. It's a heart-based one, as you talk about frequently. But we actually have to be in our bodies to feel with our heart and to open our hearts that way.
Yeah, it's tough. It's messy. And I think when you look at masculinity at its core, it's defined by its fixing and problem solving. Number one complaint by most women is that just listen to my problems, don't give me solutions. And I think the author of the Gospel of Mary that I've got here is that there's almost like an analysis of it, and it talks about how at the crucifixion there was only women present. It's almost like the men couldn't face the emotion of the situation because they couldn't fix it in some way. They couldn't deal with it. And I think that's a very feminine trait to be able to be with during suffering. And I think that's where we talk about inner balance, is that we have both masculine and feminine within ourselves. And to be in balance, we simply need to not reject the other side. In a way that a bird can't take flight with one broken wing, we have to be able to heal both sides within us so that we can then come as a polarity, and then we can contribute the best of ourselves and she can contribute the best of herself. And in doing that, we then have the heart to serve each other.
Absolutely. And it's, to speak to some of what I have heard, that everything that you just described, everything that you and I are talking about for this part on masculinity, this is not a softening of men. This is not a softening of masculinity in any manner. It is a rebalancing, exactly as you just pointed out, where there is a part of us, a feminine part of us, that is part of who we are. We can't deny that, right? And for each of us, it may be different, meaning balance doesn't mean 50-50. Balance is innate to who each of us is. And for us to recognize what's the part of us that we have rejected, that we have disowned, because when we bring it in, it makes the whole stronger. It makes the whole more complete. It makes the whole enabled to be able to function in the design that it was meant to be. And we can hold space and we can be present and we can share our presence in a completely different way. And there is, again, any time that I've been around men who have done that work, the strength, presence, as well as safety that they exude is palpable.
Yes.
Right?
I 100% agree with you. It's not a weakening. It's not a softening, because hidden in plain sight are forces that are softening men, are softening family units, whether that be social media, whether it be beer, whether it be unlimited porn, whether it be sports on TV all the time, whether it be Netflix, whether it be workaholism. All of these subtle forces that are championed by our culture, they're the subtle forces that are weakening men, that are weakening family units, because actually what I've learned through a guy called John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, he said to me that, you know, a man that is doing those types of things, porn, beer, and all that stuff, he is filling his body with estrogen because he is filling himself with nice comfort things that are nice. And a man with too much estrogen becomes an addict. He becomes self-centered. He becomes self-focused. He becomes impulsive and under the control of these forces. So actually, that's what I would argue more of a weaker man than someone who is able to take off the mask, who is able to be raw and vulnerable and exposed, not for the entirety of his time, because you know, the presence of people around us want to feel safe and secure within our presence, but there has to be a what's deeper so that we can open up to connections, deeper connections that within ourselves and within other people. I think that really becomes possible with the difficult work of heart-centered connection.
Completely. Everything you just described and all of its different forms, from beer to porn to binge watching to meat, all the things, right? It's a form of soothing, as you described. And that's just another way of hiding from our discomforts, right? It's to recognize that actually is what's, to your point, softening or weakening us, because it means that actually it's a way of distracting us as opposed to facing what we need to face, meaning we're not standing up to what we need to stand up to. We're not turning towards what we need to turn towards. Instead, we're actually intentionally taking our energy and leaking it out into different directions. And what happens? You become drained. You don't have the essence left of what you are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I felt this after our first conversation, but you and I could probably talk all day. I want to be super respectful of your time. I have a word here, Always Better Than Yesterday. It's called Heartprint. And the word Heartprint symbolizes that legacy, that ripple effect, that impact that we have on other people. And I just wonder if you'd take a moment just to reflect on what you think your Heartprint will be.
I think what I'm certainly working towards at this moment is that for me, it is to be able to bring that spirit through as freely as I can. And I hope, I intend, the biggest way that people will see that is through my children. Regardless of all the work and as a coach and a guide and a podcast, all the things, right? That's great. I love it. I give dearly to people around me. But if that impact went nowhere but my two kids, I will feel beyond complete when I leave this place.
Love that. What breeds do you have? What
breeds
do you have?
What breeds do I have? I've got a daughter and son, both teenagers, and one who's only a short ways away from university, and one who's about to enter high school. And so we're in some very special years right now. It's funny. It's actually a different take than I thought I would have, right? As you hear about the teenage years, no, it's going to be the teenage years. I'm feeling it very, very differently. I feel like this is a really, really special time because their personalities are a whole different level, right? You can see who it is that they're becoming. They're showing up with me and their mother completely differently. And with each kind of passing month, you see them, figure out more and more about who they are, at least at this stage of their life. And to me, that's like, there's some really special aspects of the relationships that are forming and taking hold right now that couldn't when they were younger. So it's, to me, this has actually been has been already a very special time.
I love that. One of the things I've said about Heartprint is that it's almost like the effect is not found in the people that I help. It's like it's felt by those who I help go on to help. It's like if I put my children out into the world, my Heartprint is everybody who interacts with my children throughout their entire lifetime. Some 80,000 people later.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Brother, I'm so grateful for your time. I'd be honored. Actually, before we do that, where should people head to find out more of your work? On this podcast, I'll put all the links in the show notes. Where else?
All the links. Yeah, all the links are in the show notes. Whatever app you're listening to, look up On This Walk, find me there. And then onthiswalk.com, best way to find me. And if you look up Luke Iorio on any social media, you'll pretty much find me.
Happy days. I'll make sure that's in the show notes, and I'd be honored if you'd leave us a final thought from your good self.
Hmm. I'd say that remember that life is conspiring at all times to return you to wholeness.
Hmm.
Every
I see
experience that
that.
we have, every experience is offering us a way of reflecting back and learning more about who we really truly are. So look for life to actually be restoring your wholeness at all times.
What a great way to finish. Luke, appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, brother. Ryan, this has been fantastic.
Thank you for making it to the end of the interview here on YouTube. I hope that our time spent together has left you a little bit better than before you push play. Before you go anywhere, please leave a comment down below, some of your key reflections, your key takeaways. I love hearing from you and what this conversation has inspired in you. Let me know what you're going to do as a result of this conversation. I will be back next Wednesday where I will share another inspiring guest. To make sure that you don't miss that, please do subscribe, hit the bell, and you will be notified as soon as it goes live. If you're curious to know how I, through Always Better Than Yesterday, can serve you, your team, your organization, please do visit alwaysbetterthanyesterday.com, and it will be my honor and privilege to help you in any way I can. Keep leading, my friends. I've been Ryan Hartley, host of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast here on YouTube. Always love.